Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday. It's 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Student Affairs Live. I am your host, Heather Shea Gasser, broadcasting live from my professional home here at Michigan State University. Today, I am pleased to welcome my three guests, Jason Merriweather, Christy Gover, and Josh Brown, to the show. We're going to be talking about the topic, addressing and preventing hazing in fraternities and sororities. As you all know, Student Affairs Live is a part of the Higher Ed Live network, and Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, which is a marketing and communications firm that works with educational institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. If you've never watched the show before, Higher Ed Live is a series of professional development shows and podcasts which are free and accessible to you in our archives on higheredlive.com. And you can also download our podcast on iTunes as well. We encourage you to be a part of our broadcast today by tuning in live, sharing your insights, comments, questions by using the hashtag HigherEdLive on Twitter. And I want to thank my friend Kelly McCarthy, who is once again helping manage our back channel today. And if you would like to receive weekly updates about the show via email, you can subscribe to our newsletter. And we're going to be sending out a tweet here shortly that will show you how to do that. And then also we're looking to collect some information about our viewers and what they like about the show, what kinds of topics they'd like to see, what they like about our website. So if you could please also send in your responses to our survey. We'll also be tweeting out that link shortly. Again, today's show would not be possible without the support of my home institution, Michigan State University, and our producer, M. Stoner. Okay, so on with the show. As I said, today we're going to be discussing the topic of hazing in fraternity and sorority life. While I personally am not affiliated with a fraternity or sorority, early in my career in student affairs, I worked as an NPC or sorority advisor, and then later I had the pleasure of advising a chapter of a fraternity chapter, actually, while I was working at the University of Arizona. So I have much direct evidence, personal experience, to say that sororities and fraternities do a lot of good for college students on our campuses. But as we know, the popular media is not always so forgiving, and often the story that's told is not very positive. So at the center of some of that media issue is the issue of hazing, and fraternity and sororities are definitely often portrayed as such. So I want to thank my guests for joining me today. Jason, Christy, and Josh all bring with them a wealth of experience and expertise, and I look forward to learning from them. And also just want to thank everybody for taking their time out of their schedules today to join us on Student Affairs Live. So to begin with, I'd like each of you to kind of give an overview of your background and specifically highlight your experience working with fraternities and sororities on college and university campuses. Christy, do you want to start first?
Sure, thanks, Heather. Hi, I'm Christy Gover. I'm the Dean of Students, Chief Student Affairs Officer at Jacksonville University in Jacksonville, Florida. I started my career in higher education really as an undergraduate as a member of Chi Omega at the University of Louisville. I continued my graduate work at the University of Louisville and started my graduate work in housing and residential life, working specifically with fraternity housing, and continued my interest in housing and working on a volunteer basis with fraternity and sorority life at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, and then transitioned to Jacksonville University as the Director of Residential Life, working again with our Greek communities and advising on a temporary basis for a little over a year our fraternity and sororities on campus, and have continued to stay connected with them in a supervisory role, working closely with our Director of Student Involvement.
Great. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Jason?
Hello, I am Jason Merriweather, Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management and Student Affairs at Indiana University Southeast in New Albany, Indiana. My Greek life background, similar to Christy, we actually both attended University of Louisville, go Cards, and as an undergrad I was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and still am active with the fraternity, and so my college experience was really shaped by all of the events and community service and all the great things that went on as a part of that organization. I was active on campus, I was an RA, and even as I've grown through my career, I have actually always never avoided, I'll be honest, avoided being the advisor for any organization. I've never actually advised a chapter, but I've collaborated with many chapters and organizations, been a part of thousands of hours of community service. And on the tough side, through my judicial role and some of my other roles, I've had to deal with hazing and some of the associated challenges with managing and investigating hazing cases. And so a lot of my specialty with consulting and expertise is helping campuses shape their hazing policies. Please call me before something happens. And making sure that campuses are in the best situation to protect their students and to protect the careers of other student affairs professionals.
Great. Josh, you want to share with us a little bit about your background?
Yes, absolutely. So, hello, my name is Josh Brown, and I'm the coordinator for the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life here at the University of South Florida on the Tampa campus. My community here is actually comprised of 44, coming into 45 chapters, and roughly 2,500 students that attend and who are members of the Greek community. And so my direct reports here would be to oversee both the MPHC and the MGC Council here on the campus. And prior to my stint here at the University of South Florida, I had some experience at Nova Southeastern University. I was able to facilitate a number of civic engagement and community engagement opportunities for their Greek community as well as the remainder of the campus. And prior to that, I was actually a little bit different than Jason and Christy. I was actually coming from a secondary education background in which I had the opportunity to enhance our tutor and mentorship programs by bringing chapters from the local college campuses into my school system to work with my students and help groom them and prepare them for the next steps of their life, which would be hopefully college or the careers that they were looking for. And through that experience, I got the opportunity to advise, and much like Jason, I would not go I kind of steered clear of the traditional advisory route at that point in time as well, but I would advise the chapters that I worked with as well as develop the members of those chapters. As they were leading my students, I needed to make sure that I was preparing the opportunity for them to become great leaders in the community and experience those successes there as well. I'm a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and I was initiated in the year of 2006 on the campus of Florida Memorial College in Miami, Florida.
Great. Thank you to all three of you for joining the show today. As you can tell, we have a fabulous panel. So again, if anybody has questions for our panelists, we welcome you to send us a tweet at Higher Ed Live, and we'll get to those questions. But first, I would like to ask, Jason, since you've done some consulting around hazing in particular, can you give us a general definition of what that means?
Very broadly, hazing is anything that is not congruent with what a national organization outlines for intake of new members into a fraternity or sorority or any Greek-letter organization. That goes from the range of embarrassment, verbal harassment, going all the way into physical abuse. Sometimes hazing involves sexual battery of members who are aspiring to join organizations, going all the way to brutality that leads to people's deaths. The worst thing about it is there's so many kind of de facto or traditional practices that organizations, especially fraternities and sororities, undertake that many times people don't think it's hazing. You know, if you just look at Florida A&M and the Robert Champion case, how many people do you think really thought that hitting someone as they walk through the bus would ultimately lead to their death? There have been cases of people they've had socks that they've taken and filled with rocks and hit people and done different things that have led to serious injury and death. So basically, hazing is anything that's not safe, that's unhealthy, that involves any type of violence and deviates from the national process of joining a fraternity, sorority, or any other organization for that matter.
Yeah, we should definitely clarify to say that we are focusing on fraternities and sororities today, but that hazing occurs in lots of different types of organizations and aspects of society. And for sure, some of our students have experienced hazing in high school organizations as well. So it's not immune to just college is not immune to just education. It can broaden beyond that scope. But our focus today is specifically fraternities and sororities. Josh or Christy, do either of you have anything you'd like to add to that general definition or how you define it within the scope of your work on your campuses?
Sure. I think Jason did an excellent job covering the definition. I would just add that anything that makes a person feel uncomfortable psychologically or physically is considered hazing. And I agree with Jason. The most concerning bit about hazing is that oftentimes our students do not see it as hazing, and that really perpetuates the problem.
Great. Josh, anything else you'd like to add?
No, actually, I believe that Jason and Christy covered the grander scope of what we consider to be hazing today.
Okay. So just doing a little bit of research for the show, I went to the StopHazing.com website where I learned that 44 of 50 states have anti-hazing laws. Can you all admit, you all are way more familiar with this than I am. At the state law level, what are these? What is this legislation prohibiting broadly? And Jason, if you want to start, anyone else who wants to add in additional thoughts?
Well, the interesting thing is that even with 44 states who have made hazing a crime or illegal, they're not all felonies in all of those states. There's a serious deviation between someone who rates hazing as a misdemeanor or rates it as a felony. The other thing we're seeing is that sometimes, even if there isn't a law specifically against hazing, if someone dies, college students are being charged with murder, or being charged with assault or battery, and the law is really being applied in a way that really speaks to the violence. Most of the time, the law doesn't necessarily get into some of the cases that may involve some of the things on campus, like making people drink concoctions and things like that. Usually those are things that can be handled at the campus level, but the law really comes into play when acts of serious violence, when there's injuries, hospital stays, and especially when students are dying. And that's the saddest part of what's going on, is that the attention that's coming is because students are dying, and as long as there's one person who has died or any person in the future who has died, there's a real challenge. One of the best books out there about hazing right now is Black Haze by Ricky Jones. And, in that book, one of the things he talks about, just up until 1990, before hazing got a lot of attention and was really, the laws began to pop up, there were 60 different cases of deaths in fraternities alone up until then. And, in 2014, it just hasn't gotten any better. So the law really focuses on the aspects of the physical violence and physical harm to students.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Chrissy, when you look at that anti-hazing legislation that's happened, and my understanding is that primarily been implemented in the last 10 years, how has this legislation impacted campus policies and practices?
I think the legislation has really provided us with the framework for our campuses, and in legitimizing the concerns that exist about hazing on college campuses and high schools for that matter. But I think what we have to consider is that it is a framework, and it is our responsibility as educators to take our policies seriously and implore other efforts to raise awareness and educate our students about hazing, and not only our policies, but the consequences that could exist should something extreme happen, and understanding the severity of it.
Yeah. Other follow-ups or thoughts on how legislation has impacted campus policy, either Jason or Josh?
Well, I can share. So in the state of Florida, one of the legislative acts that we make sure that we strongly advise our students on is the Chad Meredith Act, which not only will hold accountable the individuals who are being hazed or allowing themselves to be hazed, as well as the hazers, along with those who may be aware of even anything that's taking place that's hazing. And so all three instances and all three cases are pieces that we educate our students on, because the bystander is not innocent either. And so that's a way that the legislation has affected in the state of Florida, our campuses here.
Sure. So Josh, based on the laws and the policies and this kind of thing, I was surprised to see the statistic then that more than half of the students who are involved in clubs, teams, and organizations experience hazing today. Do you feel that number is going up? Is the trend continuing to rise, or is the trend downward turning at this point in time?
So I think that in correlation with what Christy was saying is we have broadened our framework, and I think there's a couple of things that we need to take into consideration when addressing whether or not hazing is increasing. First and foremost, we are broadening the opportunities and increasing the range of opportunities that students have to get involved in clubs and organizations that could perpetuate this cycle of hazing. And on top of that, even within the realms of the work that Dr. Allen and Dr. Madden did in conjunction with NASPA that you see on the hazing prevention website, there is a larger percentage of those students, above 50% of those students, who are actually posting these incidents on social media. And so our awareness has become heightened as well. And then on top of that, we are continuously we have broadened the range or the scope of what we consider to be hazing. And so by definition, and then we have an increase in population each year with students on college campuses. So it is safe to say when you compile all of these various aspects that we are becoming more prevalent, more knowledgeable in regards to situations that are considered hazing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think all of those factors that you suggest. So if we know that potentially the overall rate of hazing is somewhat increasing, or that maybe laws and policies aren't directly impacting the rate of hazing on campus, in each of your opinions, like, what can we do? What do we need to do at the college level, at the administration level, and particularly at the organizational level to eliminate hazing? Jason, maybe you could start, and then Christy and Josh.
Well, one of the places to begin, if you look at policy and state law, there's always sort of a missing third of the way campuses approach hazing in terms of looking at what's happening in the courts. There are several very significant legal cases that have kind of set standards for what colleges and universities are supposed to do. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, is our position to stop hazing, or is our position to protect ourselves from hazing? You know, what do we do? And in reality, the answer, I guess, would be all of the above for both of those. And so when you look at a lot of the cases, for example, there's a case that I frequently cite. It's Lloyd versus Alpha Phi Alpha, and I'll spare Josh and I'll hit a Kappa one later. But for me, that's my own fraternity. This happened at our founding institution at Cornell University, where a young man was pledging our fraternity, was just really brutally beaten and injured joining the fraternity, and that's really a sad case. But what happened with the school was they were actually found not liable for what happened to Sylvester Lloyd, because the school had very clear policies. They've educated their students on campus about hazing. They published materials, had clearly defined policies in conjunction with state laws. And most of all, when they found out something was happening, they acted on it. A lot of the times where schools get in trouble is when you know, and in student affairs, we know. You know, we're very rarely surprised by behavior. We know. We always want to try to help students, but we're very rarely surprised by the behavior. And so when colleges and universities have any knowledge or any familiarity of hazing, we've got to act on it, because your liability triples if you're aware of something and then you don't respond, and then your institution is out there where someone gets hurt later, or something happens where there's a serious injury, or even worse, someone dies because of hazing. If we had prior knowledge and didn't act on it, that Lloyd versus Alpha Phi Alpha case, Rabel v. Illinois Wesleyan, Knoll versus Board of Regents of the University of Nebraska. There are tons of cases that really lay out some very specific standards for what we're to do on our campus in terms of due diligence. One last point, then I'll hush, is I really believe that we have to start the conversation in orientation with our new students. Terrell Strayhorn has a fabulous book on college student sense of belonging, and it really looks at, the desire to fit in, the desire to be connected, and if we don't, as administrators, tell our students about hazing and define it for them and set the standard for letting us know when something happens, and some wayward Greek who wants to pledge them and beat them and hurt them gets there with the message first, we lose. So I say start early on campuses in orientation.
Great. Those are great thoughts. Chrissy, what are your thoughts about eliminating hazing if laws and policies and all of that kind of thing are maybe as to now somewhat ineffective?
I absolutely agree with Jason. I think reaching our students early and often is key to sharing the message. And orientation is a great place to start. I think as the recruitment period begins, whether you have a fall recruitment or a spring recruitment, begin talking with the potential new members. I think also the majority of universities are moving in this direction, looking at values-based leadership training for our fraternities and sororities, and going back to why your organization was founded and helping our Greek students understand that hazing is not a part of that. It was not intended to be a part of that. And really focusing on living your values is a key component of helping to eliminate hazing in the organizations.
Great. Josh?
Yes, and I again, I strongly support both Jason and Christie's ideas as far as how to make the forward motion. But one thing that I would like to suggest and that I would like to see, and part of this might be coming from my background as well, but I would like to see our Greek letter organizations who are living their values and holding themselves to their values reach out to actually secondary educational realms and begin to educate prior to even orientation, prior to college. These students are coming with the preconceived notions of what to expect, and perhaps if we can begin combating some of that before they get here, we can help just spin the cycle a little bit faster as far as getting our expectations and our word of greatness out there as far as what we expect for students when they want to join an organization.
Great. So we had a question from Twitter. Molly Kressel asks, and this actually relates to my next question, which is which type of programming or what type of programming would you recommend to expand hazing prevention beyond just the basic seminar? And my question was, like, what messages are resonating with students in particular? I mean, I think we've made a strong case for administration to address hazing. How do you get student buy-in?
Right. I think our greatest success is when we involve students in the planning and organizing of the educational efforts. And as they begin to take ownership and invest in these efforts and understand, and your student leaders understand. I think as we look at National Hazing Prevention Week and those types of efforts, absolutely they have an impact. I think, of course, it is all in the execution, but I think involving the student leaders in the planning and execution of those types of awareness events is really key. I think one of the things we always have to consider, although our students are adults, they are young adults and they are impressionable, and it's our responsibility as educators to make them aware of issues of concern and helping them take an active role in the prevention efforts. The other that I think is important, and we are talking specifically about fraternity and sorority life today, is there are some great opportunities for partnership here with athletics. And I think when our students think about the double standard that may exist, we do a great deal of educational efforts with our fraternity and sorority life initiatives, and really could partner with our athletic departments and really scale back on the perceived double standard that exists, that the athletics doesn't have the same sort of focus on prevention efforts. And many times there's overlap in our organizations with students who are involved in athletics and involved in fraternity and sorority life. So partnering together to raise awareness and educate our students, I think, could have a great impact on our campuses.
Definitely. Josh, your thoughts on what messages have worked with student leaders? The one-off workshop, the week-long focus, speakers that you'd recommend. Tell me a little bit about what's worked on your campus.
Yes, so I think one of the things that's really worked on our campus is we spend a lot of time with our leadership within our organizations and our chapters, and allowing them to understand not only the historical relevance of where hazing came from, but understanding why it is not something that is a tool to be utilized to develop future members. It is not allowing them the opportunities to see some of the greatness in some cases, unfortunately, of the organizations that they want to join, and rather perpetuating some cycles of negativity. And then we allow those leaders to address their peers. And sometimes, Heather, it allows for a greater opportunity of understanding and listening when peers are leading the charge. As far as speakers and the speaker circuit is concerned, of clearly, I'm online right now with some great individuals who I would highly recommend any campuses reach out to, if willing, to have them come in and address some issues concern and educate as well. But there are so many, Heather, there are so many great speakers out there, from Dr. Rasheed Cromwell to Dr. Lori Hart, and even if you were to go to the Campus Speak website and just take a look at some of the bios and some of the individuals that they have, there's just greatness there that can have a very large impact on those lives that we're trying to make sure are doing things correctly.
Great. Thanks so much. Those are great suggestions. We'll get a compilation of all the resources and links that you all would suggest that we add, and add this to the page related to this particular show's topic today, so that folks who are watching can follow up as well. Jason, your thoughts on what's worked? What are some of the national best practices in training resources in response to hazing on campus?
Couple things. One, in terms of speakers, you can't go wrong with Ricky Jones. As I said, he wrote Black Haze in 2004. He's actually now working on the 10th anniversary edition of that book to really examine issues of men, masculinity, and violence. I've brought him to many campuses. Larry Ross, who is in California, he's written some great books on Greekdom. And Terrell Strayhorn, again, just looking at it from a perspective of sense of belonging, really impactful with first-year students. And so, those are some people that I've used. I have frequent conversations with Elizabeth Allen from the University of Maine, who conducted the Allen and Madden study that Josh referred to earlier. There are a lot of great places to get information and resources. And those are some of the people I brought on my own campus. And so, when it's something that you do, you've got to find people that are going to bring it better than you when you bring it to the campus. And those are the ones who I would say, hey, open your door. In terms of some of the practices, what I found is that keeping the organizations connected to the training has really been beneficial to me over time. I have numbers for regional directors, consultants from national organizations, state intake overseers, whatever the title may be in a different organization. I have them all on speed dial. And those are people that if something goes on, I believe in being in touch with them, not just when something happens, but to have already established a relationship and inviting them to trainings. Keeping the advisor close is really important. I can pick on Josh now. There's a great case, Kenner versus Kappa Alpha Psi. And this was a case where a pledge was beaten to the point of seizures and hypertension, and just had a lot of really crazy stuff happen to that young man. And in those acts of violence, the family of the victim sued a whole lot of people. They sued schools, boards of regents, the fraternity, and the case ended up being dismissed against everyone except the chapter advisor. And the chapter advisor's liability was based on the fact that they had never gone over hazing policy. They had never gone over national standards and regulations for hazing from the fraternity. Had totally ignored campus regulations, and that advisor was left out to deal with that case on their own, and everyone else was dismissed. And so just in terms of due diligence, I think it's really important to have the advisors present I think it's important to do separate trainings with advisors, but it's really important to have them present, have your national organizations present and on board during your trainings. And again, I just repeat, start early and start often. You know, maybe once a semester. On our campus, we have great Greeks. We haven't had any issues with them. We have phenomenal Greeks at IU Southeast, and I'm very grateful for that. But when they get back on August 16th, first day, first conversation is hazing. And that's an important part. And I just think for all the positives, for all the community service hours, for the high GPAs, for all of those things, you cannot ignore the issue of safety. And it's really about, do you value life or do you value membership of the organization? And so those are the tough conversations that you have to have, and you have to have them often.
Yeah, great. So I think one of the things that I have, definitely recognized in your responses today is that while what the campuses are doing is important, equally important is what the national organizations are saying, as well as alumni and how, they impact the culture on the individual campuses. Talk to me a little bit about what you know about national organizations and how they're impacting, because, student leaders in our, oftentimes the e-boards for our national organizations go to a summer leadership program, or they participate in some kind of training so that they can then pass along that information. And I don't mean to say which organizations are doing it really well, but what have you seen has worked at that level as well? Because I think there has to be the message coming from both sides. Josh, you want to start this one?
Sure. To be honest, I believe that we're considering constantly considering taking into consideration what the campus cultures are looking like and how they're shifting. And so in the national organizations, what they seem to be doing regularly is taking a time to really delve into membership development programs. They have stringent policies and procedures as to how membership intake is supposed to be conducted, and they spend a lot of time in workshops and national developmental opportunities for all the chapters, and so that they can actually heighten I want to say security, but heighten the awareness and eliminate some of the hazing opportunities that we're seeing students to be able to create for themselves. One council that I think that has taken a large step in is the Panhellenic Council, in that they've really taken a liking to and an active stance in supporting the National Hazing Prevention Week stuff, the hazing hotlines, to open up channels for people who are experiencing negativity to be able to call in and put a stop to a lot of that. And I'm going to actually applaud a lot of sororities outside of even the Panhellenic who have really gotten a grasp of what it is that they need to do from an alumni standpoint, from an advisory standpoint, from a national board, in order to get their hands involved from beginning to end when it comes to initiating and bringing in new members. And so we're seeing a lot of stringent structure take place, and it's only enhancing every year with the various developmental opportunities that they provide for their current and their alumni members. This is not an easy task to be an advisor. It's not an easy task to oversee intake, and I think that our national organizations are not only recognizing that, but taking a lot of active steps to make sure that they're training, that they're educating, and that they're setting the guidelines and policies in place so that we can kind of narrow those situations down to hopefully what will be a change in direction.
Great. Jason, you mentioned having national organization connections available at the tip of your fingers on speed dial, et cetera, and building those partnerships before issues arise. What are some of the things that you've seen that have been working really well at the national level that have curtailed hazing within organizations?
Well, let's take a look at Sigma Alpha Epsilon and Delta Sigma Theta. They've both made the decision to completely stop national intake on a grand scale. No chapters are allowed to take in new initiates. They're not creating opportunities to start new chapters. And having worked with those organizations, and even with the organizations who are on my campus, I found that there's pretty consistent messaging where the organizations have taken so much of a financial hit, so much of a PR hit, because people who just go totally rogue have the opportunity to do so pretty much unchecked. And so I will admit to you, I've been on college campuses before where I've met people who said they were active in fraternities, and then when you check the roster, you find out, well, that fraternity's been suspended for 3 years. What are they doing? And so when you have things like that going on, it really puts the national organizations in a position to say, you know what, we've just got to shut it all down. Again, as I said earlier, the challenge is really that the students who want to be Greek only know what the Greeks tell them most of the time. There are a number of people who are legacy, or may want to do it because they know someone who did, or they knew someone famous who was in that organization. But then when they get to the campus, the real indoctrination really occurs on campus. And so because of that, I think you're going to see more organizations take the lead that Delta and that SAE have taken. Delta Sigma Theta has its don't. Delta is opposed nonsense totally, and it's a catchy acronym that's been a part of a campaign that they've had going for the last few years. And the other thing is national organizations are supporting schools. You used to see a lot of finger pointing. The national organization would blame the school. The school would blame the national organization. So now that the partnerships are working better, you're seeing in concert where if there's an order of cease and desist, that the organization and the school are both supporting that. If there's a decision to suspend or expel chapters or members, you're seeing more universities and national organizations work in concert on that. And I think that people are just tired of it because you just cannot justify why someone died to join your fraternity or sorority. And the minute someone can make sense to me that I beat this person until they died, and it is okay because it means that much to me to protect the name or the tradition of my fraternity or sorority, until someone can convince me of that, I'm going to continue with this message. I think we all are.
Yeah, that's a great point. Chrissy, what have you seen work?
I believe Jason and Josh are absolutely correct in partnering with our national organizations. I do believe the leadership conferences that you referenced are of importance. I've seen our students go to the conferences and come back highly motivated and very well educated. And I think it is important to continue to support students to attend the conferences. I also would like to kind of go back to the previous question and talk about another approach in helping students address hazing, and that may be a more intimate approach. I am always a fan of bringing in a national speaker. I also think sometimes a more intimate approach of bringing in a consultant shows students that we care and we understand we aren't necessarily always the people they want to talk to. And sometimes they may not feel comfortable talking with us because of the consequences. And Dr. Gentry McCreary has done a good bit of research in this field, and in addition to his dissertation has some great information out there. He came to our campus a few years ago and did some consulting work for us, not specifically for hazing, but in finding that our students were very, very open and talking with him about how we can better improve our Greek system and better support them from an administrative perspective. And so I think taking that more intimate approach can also sometimes better serve our students. And absolutely, I think the key is partnering with national organizations and encouraging our students to stay connected and see them as a resource. I remember when I was in college and our chapter visitor came, it was hustle and bustle until they arrived to make sure everything was in tip-top shape and we were prepared. And I think seeing them as a resource is key, rather than seeing them as someone who can come in and give you the to-do list of how to be a better organization, but to really rely on them as the resource they are designed to be.
Right, that's great.
You think of a great point. We also have to make sure that we take time to train our faculty as well when we bring people on campuses. Faculty want to know what to look for. If there's a student who had been really engaged, really active in class, all of a sudden their appearance becomes a bit shoddy, they're disengaged, maybe their performance is struggling a little bit. And so as we bring in training, people to conduct training and or to be consultants, or even if we can do it ourselves, it's really important that we empower faculty with information to kind of recognize some of the signs. And to be able to reach out to students and to know where to refer a hazing issue or just a concern, even if it's just, because many times the faculty can see it even before we do. And if we empower them and include them in some of the training and some of the things that we're doing as well, I think that can be really effective.
Definitely. I mean, faculty are concerned about student success, right? So I think it's tying this to that broader overall goal. So Zeb Davenport has a question, and as we talked about at the beginning of the show, our topic is really focused on fraternities and sororities, but definitely hazing occurs in lots of different types of organizations. And his question was, and perhaps as senior student affairs officers on your campuses, how do you work with non-Greek organizations to curtail hazing, especially when you don't have that type of national organization reinforcing that message, and it might be a more local student group and just the culture of your campus that you're working with. Christy, do you want to start on that?
Sure. I think regardless of the organization, you have to be clear about your expectations and consequences. Some of the research indicates that one of the reasons students continue to haze is because the consequences are not severe enough. And I think so being very clear in expectations and working closely with the club and organization training that happens, we absolutely should be covering hazing in these trainings with those organizations as well. And I think working with, partnering with other departments on campus, such as athletics, is really key. Working closely together to make sure we're sending a consistent message that it won't be tolerated on our campus regardless of the organization.
Great. Either of you have something you'd like to add to that as far as working with other organizations that aren't fraternities and sororities?
Well, first, let me say hello to my good friend Zeb. He's a good brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. Hello, Zeb. Glad you're watching. Really quick, if you go back to the Allen and Matten study in 2008, which is really one of the most comprehensive studies on Greek life ever, one of their data findings was that 48% of students who are hazed or engaging hazing talk to their peers about it. And that's a real opportunity for students who are in a position of being hazed, or they're in a position where someone is asking them to do something and they're a part of a sports team or a club or an organization or maybe the band. Empowering all of your students to recognize the signs and to have facts and information about safety, especially for some of these low-level things. That's kind of how you can infiltrate the culture of some of the other organizations that are non-Greek, is to just kind of say, hey, from a preventative standpoint, you could get hurt by this. And even if they can't convince the student to talk to someone, at a minimum, they can convince the student not to participate. And so a lot of that kind of goes with having a broad and deliberate message about who can be hurt and how. And and I know sometimes we're so afraid of getting sued. I go back to orientation. Sometimes when I suggest to schools to say, hey, you've got to add this to your orientation, their pushback is, oh, well, I don't want to say it in front of the parents. I don't want to talk about that when they're coming here. And I say, well, you're missing an opportunity. Allen and Matten research also say that I think it's over half of the students will have some type of conversation with their parents about potentially being hazed. And so a lot of that is just having a broad message that we make for everyone. But going back to fraternities and sororities, I would say that's among some of the most dangerous in terms of the number of people who've died. But we do have to just make sure that we have those conversations available to everyone.
Josh, your thoughts?
I believe that Christy and Jason really hit it on the head. As far as making sure that we have the opportunities and heightening the awareness of the ways that not only students but parents and everybody else can reach out and allow their voices to be heard. I think Jason hit it is key. And then the educational aspects, again, yes, we have to continue to educate our campus constituents, and strengthen those partnerships and the relationships so that people know the types of things to look for and how to address. But we also need to, and this is going to be kind of dangerous to say, but we also need to learn ways to actually open up those conversations so that students feel comfortable sharing even with us as the administrators on the campuses without having that fear of what is going to happen. And I think that if we can find a way to do that, it'll allow for us to kind of get a better gauge as to how to get our hands on and prevent, not just in Greek life, but in athletics and as well as clubs and organizations and all these other auxiliary opportunities that are perpetuating hazing.
Yeah, that brings up, I think, a really important point is that there is this kind of culture of secrecy, right? Because they want to be a part of the organization. They don't want their organization to get in trouble. And so if I'm the person who tells, what does that do for me as far as my continued involvement in that organization, even if something is not right? How have you approached that? I mean, I know when I was working at Arizona, we had an anonymous hazing hotline, which would then prompt an investigation, which were considerably more challenging when we didn't know the person itself who was making the report. How do you approach that so that people feel there's a level of comfort with sharing the information about what's happening? Chrissy, do you want to start?
A level of comfort in sharing. I think it goes back to the educational piece. I think part of that is in how we handle ourselves professionally and making ourselves approachable and available. And sometimes that is really more about the people who work closely with Greek life and working with the advisors as well. I think talking with our students about the kind of the checklist that's on stophazing.org. What would your mom think if she saw this? Are they asking you to keep it a secret? What would an administrator think if they walked upon this? And questions like that. But I think making ourselves approachable and certainly willing to engage in conversation with our students about these issues and helping provide them with mechanisms of reporting that make it simple for them and really remove those barriers.
Yeah, Jason, you talked about kind of this culture of belonging, and actually a question came in over Twitter, which is how do you encourage students to stand up to hazing when they're trying to be accepted? And that's from Anne Murphy. So during that kind of process of all kinds of other transitions in their life, how do we encourage our students to stand up to hazing?
First, let me please correct. I think I said over half, and I took a peek at the Alan Madden study. It's 26% of students say something to their parents. And so if you've got just over a fourth of the students are speaking to their parents, over half of the students are speaking to their friends, a lot of that goes back to the way that we design the conversation. Honestly, hazing is on par with with a lot of other violent crimes in terms of victim blaming. And so a lot of the message has to be that, this is wrong, this is illegal. I understand that there's a minority of people who are pushing for this, but in reality, for students to know that there's a broad community who will support you. Unfortunately, sometimes, when people report hazing, they're cyberbullied. I've even seen one institution where some people who were hazed were actually, I've seen a few institutions, I'm thinking of one in particular, where people who were victims of hazing and reported it were shamed so bad by members of the student population that they had to transfer and go to other schools. And so I say all that to say a lot of that really comes with the messages that are all across the campus. Getting the messages to parents, getting the messages to other students, to peers, to anywhere that a student turns, they're going to get a consistent message of, hey, this is not right, this is not safe, it can't be worth you dying, it can't be worth you being in the hospital, it can't be worth this pain or you spending all your money. And it's really about getting the messages all across the board. Chrissy hit a great point earlier when she said that sometimes students don't want to come to the student affairs professionals. That's where if you've trained your faculty, if you've communicated with your parents, if you've communicated with your peers, it's someplace when they make that statement that I'm concerned, they've got to be able to get good information. And that's our job, is to put that good information about safety and protection of life in as many places as possible. And when you cast the net, you just really hope that when they turn to a place, you have empowered someone with the right information to say, no, this isn't okay. And here's how I can help you. Or here's who can help you even if I can't.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So a couple of people have chimed in with some comments, not necessarily questions, and I wanted to just reframe a couple of them here because Shane Cadden, I think, makes a really great statement that I think we can be positive about our university experiences while still being realistic about the dangers. And I think that really resonated with me because it's about, as he said, transparency as well. Josh, you mentioned something earlier in the show about social media, and I was just kind of, I think broadly social media has lots of impacts on how our students are experiencing their college careers as opposed to when I was in college 20 years ago. But talk a little bit how this particularly relates to hazing and privacy issues and, the ease at which students can record and then distribute information about what's happening within their organizations, and what you've seen or what recommendations you would have as students are exploring identity issues around social media.
Sure. So I think that Jason and Jason's mention of the research in regards to how many students share with peers, connectivity has become so much easier. Whether it be Instagram or Facebook or whatever venue students want to utilize to connect. And one thing that and particularly this generation of students seems to not really pay too much attention to is the fact that once things are put on the net, they're out there and you cannot retract them. And so there's such a desire for students to prove in a lot of cases their value or their legitimacy within an organization, and so they're very quick to post things that are in fact illegal, that are acts of hazing, and once they put that out there, anybody can see it. And so some things that I've come across, anything that pertains to these illegal activities, these behaviors, the connectivity piece, again, it starts with the student, but it ends with everything from between administration to law enforcement and everything else. So, I mean, this is something that we see on a regular basis when it comes to hazing situations that pop up on campuses.
Yeah. Christy or Jason, how have you all handled this? And do you, when you look into hazing investigations, how is social media or what's available on students' Instagram accounts or whatever, how has that played a role?
I honestly have not had a great deal of experience in having that type of support when doing investigations. Although I will echo Josh's comments that that certainly students are more freely posting sensitive material like that. And in the investigations that I've conducted, we haven't had that type of support. But I'm curious to hear what Jason has to say. I think it certainly does play a role and plays a greater role each day as media, social media presents itself.
Yeah, what I found, especially in collaborating with national organizations, their rules are a little more broad, and they have a lot more autonomy to go into social media, Instagram accounts, dig into Facebook pages. I know some organizations, they've even hired private investigators to comb through social media to find evidence to support making decisions about hazing. In fact, there's even a case I'm familiar with where some students who were pledging other students created a group me to have conversations with the pledges, and someone got fed up and turned the group me over to a national organization. So I think it just like without social media before it was as prevalent as it was, they're just taking another element of society and adding it to the foolishness, for lack of a better term. There are some cases. There's the Mikowski versus University of Delaware case. There's some other cases that kind of involve social media and higher ed, where it's still kind of murky on campuses as to whether or not you can introduce social media evidence into judicial cases. That's more of a by-campus thing. I'm familiar with some campuses who, hey, if you're an RA and you post a picture of yourself drinking, hey, good luck with that for your job. I know other campuses who try to avoid that. In terms of hazing, that really comes down to sort of a campus level policy. there hasn't been that decisive case that's made it to the Supreme Court that gives so much clarity of precedent. Because I can cite cases that say, hey, you can use social media in your campus policies, but I can also cite cases that say run from using social media in your campus judicial process. So it really comes down to sort of a campus level decision. Some campuses do have policies that say if you use your .edu or your campus computer for your social media activity, it becomes fair game. So if you're posting hazing activities using a campus computer or an iPad provided by the campus, then it becomes fair game for the campus to use in the investigation process there. So that's more of a campus level thing, not a great national trend that I can say definitively, I say do this. I really kind of go case by case with each school based on their own policy and state law.
Yeah. I don't know if you all are familiar with this book. ACPA is partnering with Eric Qualman to put out some information specifically, hopefully to help students and campuses address issues of digital citizenship. And so it's called What Happens in Vegas Stays on YouTube, and the subheading Privacy is Dead. You know, even if campuses aren't using it as an investigation tool, the fact that this will live on in perpetuity, I think, is an important message for students to know that when they post information or share, and even if they think they have their privacy settings set, once it's out there, people can screenshot, they can share it that way. And so that's hopefully going to be a resource, because I know a lot of campuses are kind of struggling with, and this could be a whole nother show in and of itself, of how to help students manage their digital reputations and their digital identity, so that, you know, and I think organizations need to be concerned about that as well, because it does come down to how we are perceived. Another question on Twitter, and then I'm looking at the end of our hour coming up here. So one more question from Twitter, and then final thoughts. This person, Christopher Towton, asked about any advice on connecting the personal safety and life discussions with non-physical forms of hazing. So I think he's really getting at, like, what about the emotional types of hazing that don't then go into the realm of personal safety or life concerns? How do you address that type of hazing?
If I can on that, and hey, Chris, he's a good friend. Chris is a great guy. Hey, Chris. So with that in mind, really, that goes back to something Christy mentioned earlier. That that's really on the campus. There's really this idea that campuses don't have harsh enough sanctions for anything but violence. And looking the other way, you know, the low-level stuff begets the higher level and the more harsh stuff, and that's really where it begins. And it starts with not looking the other way and having policies that aren't so explicit to focusing on violence that they miss all the other things. If you look at full definition from hazing, and this is from Ricky Jones: financial extortion, rituals, mental abuse, sleep deprivation, binge drinking, consumption of hazardous foods or concoctions, psychological battery, alcohol, forced alcohol consumption, drug abuse. Most of those things don't involve touching anyone. Because those are things that are out there, it's really important that we stop and say, hey, what are we doing about this with our own policy on our own campus? We have some familiarity with what our students are doing, or even if we think it's not happening, our policy better cover it just in case we learn that it is.
Great. Chrissy or Josh, any thoughts on that?
I think Jason nailed it. I think the psychological is of equal importance to address on our campuses, and I think Jason is absolutely right.
All right, so let's move on to final thoughts. Josh, you want to start? What are your final thoughts on addressing and preventing hazing on college and university campuses among fraternities and sororities?
I think that one of the greatest tools that we can utilize is the students themselves, and giving them the weight and balance system of when it comes to fraternities and sororities, historically, we're talking organizations of greatness that have opportunities for college students to experience achievements that are second to none. And when we talk about the hazing and the negativity, we really need to couple that with a balance of, is it worth it? And what the it is losing your organization. How many chapters are being expelled from campuses because of this cyclical hazing situation that continues? And then you have to ask, and I put this, I put a lot of my students in this position. I'll ask them, if you are in charge of your organization today, and you had to literally make a decision as to whether or not the behaviors that you're condoning, if negative, are worth losing the chapter, how would the rest of the nation feel about that, who are members of your organization? So I think that having that weight and balance system and holding the students accountable, because at the end of the day, if we lose these organizations and we're questioning their relevance, we're bringing a certain amount of dishonor to the whole purpose behind the organizations in the first place.
Yeah, the implications are really great. I think that's a really important point. Chrissy, final thoughts?
Sure. I would say by and large, fraternities and sororities bring great value to our campuses, and continuing to encourage our fraternities and sororities to live their values, partnering with our national organizations, taking advantage of educational efforts, and keeping those lines of communication open, and making sure that our policies and expectations are clear with our students will drive the message home.
Great. That's a great point. Jason?
One thing I can say, in the Eric Qualman book, there's the 3-second rule. I can't remember if it's rule 13 or 16, but there's the 3-second rule that says before you post something, think about it. If you have to stop and think about it for 3 seconds, not the thing to post. We're actually purchasing that book on our campus for our freshmen. We're going to have digital copies for all of our new freshmen. And it'll be interesting to see how students work with digital identity on that. So if you do have that conversation, I want to be there. In terms of hazing, it's really simple. When I speak on campuses, I give my finale away all the time. And I'll tell you, when I conduct trainings and I'm working with students, my finale is real simple. I just ask the young people in the room, can anyone in this room stand up, look at me in my face, look at all the other students, if they're aspiring members of Greek organizations in the room. You've got advisors, you've got people from your fraternity or sorority in the room. Can anyone stand up and make an argument right now that hazing is worth another person losing their life? Oddly, no one ever stands up. The thing that we have to do is develop some congruency between the behavior that you can shame publicly and then what happens when the students are left to their own devices and representing some of these crazy tripped up ideas about their organizations. And so at the end of the day, it's just not worth another life. I cannot live knowing that another student could die in the name of joining a fraternity or sorority. It's just not worth it.
I think that's a really important part to end on, important point to end on. So thank you so much, Jason. Actually, thank you to all three of you. This was a fabulous conversation and hopefully has sparked some thoughts among the folks who are viewing today. Again, we want to continue the conversation on the hashtag HigherEdLive, so please feel free to add your thoughts and perspectives. And we'll be posting a link to this show, if you missed any part of it, to the HigherEdLive website shortly. So thanks again to all three of you, and as always to our program sponsors. Just to give you a few program notes, coming up 2 weeks from today, I'll be back here on HigherEdLive talking with three individuals, Dr. Kathy Collins, Dr. Rachel Beach, and Bob Coffey, about serving international students, primarily on campus, but just broadly in housing and in other student services areas. So I'm excited about having that conversation as many of our campuses are facing a huge influx of international students this fall. And you can receive ongoing announcements through our newsletter by subscribing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, as well as subscribing to our iTunes podcast so you can listen to all of the past episodes of Student Affairs Live. Please tweet me at Heather Gasser if you have thoughts or additional topics that you're interested in seeing us highlight here. And once again, I just welcome you all to participate in the conversation. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Make it a great week. Thanks, you three.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.